Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is Acht and Scheisse. Yeah, Acht and Scheisse. Okay, so here we go. All right, Acht and Scheisse starts like they all want to start with Joseph von Fraunhofer, who has decided that he wants to be the new Monday, September 10th, 1906, as in that every episode is about him, but no episodes are about him. It's unbelievable. I was getting ready to go through and do my full episode on Fraunhofer here when I decided to click on the name George von Reichenbach, and I mentioned him, and he's a partner of Schneider, and so I hadn't really looked at him, so I wanted to just kind of see what he was about, just so I might be able to say something about him when I was rolling through. Big mistake. So I read George Friedrich von Reichenbach, German scientific instrument maker, born at Durlach in Baden on 24 August 1771. And I looked at that and I was like, anytime I see the same number backward and forward within a date, it makes me pay closer attention. And so what I have here are two eights. And I realized that August is the 8th month of the year. And that 24, 2 times 4 is 8. And I'm like, God, there are 8s just popping all over his birthday. And then I looked at his death. 2 plus 1 is 3. May is the 5th month for 8. You do 8 times 1, that's 8. And 2 plus 6 is 8. I mean, you can make 8s all over this guy's birth and death dates. I thought that was absolutely amazing. So I immediately went to his name. And I did all kinds of gematria searches, and I was kind of surprised I could not make any significant connection to his name and the number 8 gematria-wise. Although I'm sure those connections must exist. I just couldn't make them happen. And I also translated his name, and so I'm not going to go through all the web pages of the translation, but the English to German translation, according to Fat Man, is that George Friedrich von Reichenbach means the peaceful chieftain farmer of the realm by the river. Chieftain, peaceful chief farmer of the realm by the river. That's what his name means, which is really kind of cool. And I think it's interesting that he looks like just about every British rock star of 1967. And a couple of others too. But his father was a master mechanic and a master cannon borer, so he comes from weapons manufacturing. And that's where his money comes from. He goes to military school, and he becomes chummy with the astronomer there, and he helps build astronomical instruments like sextants. Yeah, I got something right. My phone told me so. Right, and he wins a scholarship to go to England to meet this James Watt and Matthew Boulton. And now James Watt, Royal Society and the Royal Society of Edinburgh, he's really involved with the steam engine in the last quarter of the 18th century, 1776 and onward. And his partner, Boulton, who Reichenbach goes to meet. Right? It says here, this is very interesting. In the final quarter of the 18th century, the partnership installed hundreds of Boulton and Watt steam engines, hundreds of steam engines. And I got to imagine in the 1770s and 80s, 90s, what have you, that these steam engines could not have been cheap to manufacture. And they installed hundreds of them. Installed them where and to whom? So that's really sort of interesting, and unfortunately kind of diverges away from the line of inquiry that I'm under, which is more astronomical with spectroscopy and history. But very interesting that he makes these kind of connections, steam engine connections, comes from the son of a manufacturer. Like I said, he partners with Schneider, who we're going to talk about very soon. But I really just unbelievably drawn by these 8s, and I was thinking, like, God, 8s never really pop up for me. I always catch 3s, 6s, 9s, that kind of thing, right? 8s, 2s, 4s, I don't know, they never really resonated with me as I've been going on. So I was like, well, maybe it's time to take a look at the number 8, and looking at, and so I figured let's start with the esoteric meaning, because that's kind of, where this storyline is coming from. And, it talks about it, how it's it symbolizes the holding, right? The fate of inevitability, infinity. And it has really interesting ties to the Hebrew gematria and the numbers, right? And some of these web pages really go into that, but that's not kind of where I want this episode to go, having read through all of this stuff. But I kind of started there, and we will touch on it a little bit. What else about the number 8 could I learn? And now there's a whole lot about the number 8. But I'm just trying to stick this episode in with the things that I think relate to the story, right? And so I cannot get into all the mathematics, but 8 is a crazy number, and I highly recommend getting into 8. Read this stuff. It's amazing. All right, but so here we go. We're going to start right away with that it's the base of the octal number system, which is mostly used with computers. And now it's just another like the decimal system and systems based on 10, 12, 6 or whatever. It's a number system based on 8, and it was used and is used to this day in computer programming. Where is it? In computers. All right, these early computing machines of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right, all the way through to today, where it says all modern computing platforms, however, use 16, 32, or 64-bit words, further divided into 8-bit bytes, right? All divisions of 8. And we all know, 8, 16, 32, 64, that's all ties into the video games and the visual displays and things like that, right? So I thought that was, something I really wasn't expecting to find, right? A connection to the computer programming languages. All right, and let's see. Its placement in the Fibonacci sequence is really cool. Right? They talk about how it's the there are 8 convex deltahedra, the deltahedron, right? And now I'm looking at all, and I see a lot of these geometric shapes when I was looking at this stuff, and it only just makes me think of Dungeons and Dragons die. Right? I don't know why. Corresponding Dungeons and Dragons die. Right? It has a cube, which is a regular standard die, right? It has 8 vertices. But there's something coming up here that's really interesting. They talk about its written form, right, and the history of it, which I'm not going to get into. But when it comes to typefacing, and now this is interesting because really computer programming deals with typeface. Those numerals are typed in, right? It says, just as in most modern typefaces, right, in typefaces with text figures, the 8 character usually has an ascender. For example, in 148. And I think and I'm glad that they put these lines here to demonstrate it, because it also, the 4 has a descender. And so if you wanted to look at this, and when you actually read the words, it goes into a melody, right? It's 148, right? Bum, bum, bum. It shows the musicality, of the numbers, right? And the tone that they would invoke without even having to be in music, right? And the infinity symbol, of course, right? 8 goes on forever. So I thought that was kind of cool, right? And in physics, right, of course, it's a magic number. Do you believe in magic? Right? Science doesn't want us to, but they're happy to use the term. Right? Am I wrong about that? Right? Scientists and these guys with their mathematics, they don't want you to believe in magic, but 8 is the second magic number. Now, wait a minute, there was... And in astronomy, it says here that since the demotion of Pluto to a dwarf planet on August 24th, 2006, in our solar system, 8 of the bodies orbiting the sun are considered to be planets. And I'm like, wait a minute, August 24th, 2006, 888? What? Right? Because Pluto was the 9th planet, they drop it and it goes back to 8. They do that on the date of all these 8s. That is not a coincidence at all. Right? It's the atomic number of oxygen, that important element of which we breathe. It sustains life. I can't get into all the biology of it, but there's somewhere else I want to get into this. Right? 8 cognitive functions. Think about that. They want us to believe that. Timothy Leary experienced them, tripping balls. How many hits of acid was he on when he experiences and identifies these hierarchy of 8 levels of consciousness? Just so happens that those correspond with the Jungian cognitive functions, right? And there's somewhere else they talk about that too. They talk about that too. Right? I like standard 8, super 8, 8 millimeter film formats. Very early film formats, especially in a portable way. Home movies and stuff. 8 millimeter. No coincidence with that. Yellow and blue, right? It has interesting aspects in architecture. Octagons and gazebos and pagodas. Bandstands and stuff. Things like Creatore would have played on. But it says 8 colicoles. Colicoles rise out of the leafage in the Corinthian capital, ending in leaves that support the volutes. And now this is on all of our columns and stuff. And I've talked about, right? It's the columns like that. I guess there's 8 patterns of 8 there. Right, and the spiral columns here, these are called volutes. See, learned something new. I knew I was going to get to those. One aspect I wanted to touch about before I move on to the big one, or there's a couple. One aspect I don't want to forget to leave out is its connection to Hinduism and Ashtha, right, or Ashta in Sanskrit, right? It's the number of wealth and abundance, prosperity, which also ties into fertility as well, right? The goddess Lakshmi has 8 forms as Ashta Lakshmi, right? And so that reminded me, because eventually all of this is going to go back to, when I get into Baltimore, it's going to get into the ancient Canaanite religion and how, with Baltimore, and now the consort of Baal is this Asherah. And I thought that was, when I saw the name Ashta, that's what it made me think of. So now there are connections to 8 in these early goddesses, and now connecting the Middle Eastern goddess, Asherah, who was also married to Yahweh, by the way. Again, I'm not going to get into her now because it's all going to come in Baltimore, but connect her now even further to Far Eastern gods. Really kind of cool connection to make for my story going forward, right? It has its correspondences in Christianity, right? It's a number of beatitudes. Beatitude, the 8 blessings of Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. Beatitude. Can't even do it. Okay, and I like this in Islam. It's the number of gates of heaven. It's also the number of planets. So the planets are like the gates of heaven. I kind of like that. In Wicca, there are 8 Sabbaths. Also 8 points on a compass rose. The 4 cardinal and their subsidiaries. Right, here we go with Ogdoad and the 8 primordial deities of creation. And now this is bringing in your Gnosticism. Right? Scientology has 8 dynamics of existence to go along with Timothy Leary and Carl Jung. It has lucky number properties. Then in astrology, in the Middle Ages, 8 was the number of unmoving stars in the sky and symbolized the perfection of incoming planetary energy. And I think it's interesting, looking at Scientology the way that I am and trying to connect the way that they used the science that they've created and the numbers and the background that they've said. Is this the reverse engineering of certain technologies? Could these technologies that they use today have come from other sources, and this is just a story that they put in there to explain it away, make it look legit? I don't know, but these 8s popping up with the planets being these unmoving stars, which is interesting, and I look at that a little bit. And so I just think it's really interesting, 8 popping up with, looking at the stars, and I'm going to get a little bit closer. We're going to delve deeper into what some of these people were looking at in the sky, but they talk about it was these celestial spheres, All right, and they talk about who talked about these and what they believed in ancient times, and and what was done to these concepts to move them forward, so they can speed up the history of spectroscopy into the machinery and to the explaining of what our vast and cosmic universe is. All right, very interesting story. Definitely check some of that out. And I'm going to as I go forward, I'm sure. All right, and I do like its position 8 is with in music. The eighth step is the new octave, in the musical scale. All right, but there's one I didn't look at, and that's on purpose because it's just really an amazing connection to make, I think. Anyway, right, and especially when you're looking at this stuff and trying to find ways to question the science that they put forth. And I read this. It says, all right, that the lowest dimensional even unimodular lattice is the 8-dimensional E8 lattice. Even positive, definite unimodular lattices exist only in dimensions divisible by 8. When I first read that, I was like, what? The 8th dimension? How many dimensions are they working with? Are they telling us that they're working with? Are these theoretical dimensions? Right? Because this says that this one only exists in dimensions divisible by 8. Well, how many dimensions have they identified? I don't know, because I'm not a physicist. I'm not looking into this stuff. But this is the stuff that they want to use to push their narrative, right? Absolutely. They have it worked out somehow, right? And my first thing was to because I read reading the word lattice, it's like, well, I know what a lattice is, right? This is what lattices are. Right? They're just basic grid patterns, all right? And useful for building so many things. And it's patterns like this that they use to build like 3D visuals. And before I get going with what lattices are, I just wanted to also correlate with the computer programming and my boy and our boy George Friedrich von Reichenbach. When I was deciphering his name, right, I was looking at it syllable by syllable, and the N in Reichen, right, is the definition of that is that it's a unit of measurement equal to half an M, and approximately the average width of typeset characters. And I think it's interesting on a couple of notes, because phonetic, for one, N, right, it's read or it's spelled like it's said, right, and M as well. But in our English alphabet, N comes after M, but the unit of measurement, N, is half of M, and it really is because, N is just itself folded over, right? M is just itself folded over, right? So I think that's really amazing, and that's the average width of typeset characters. And the computer programming, the numerals for any binary code, whether it's written in, octal or whatever, they have typeset width. And I think it's interesting that that's in his name, right? And that it also means it's the plural of some nouns, like children and oxen, meaning multiple. Right? And it's a verb. It means expressing entry into a specified state or location. As I translated the name, Reichenbach, realm of the river, a realm by the stream or brook. So I wanted to put that in there too, going forward with what lattices are. Like a lattice is just like this grid pattern, and you can use this type of pattern for so many different things, right? Right? Not only that, but it's also, it's also the checkerboard, the black and white checkerboard, and we all know about that, right? But when I think about a lattice and the checkerboard and seeing it like this, what I really think about is like the 3D graphic illustrations, right? And things like this. And how if, technology, the way that they have it as it exists for us today, and trying to sort of maybe tie our story, is our reality a matrix-like hologram, or could it be, was the mud flood somebody spilling their coffee on a computer chipboard? Right, that kind of thing. Who knows? I don't know. But when I'm now tying in this spectroscopy to computers and this concept of the matrix and stuff. You know, with the Hopfield networks and the church machines resembling in our houses and everything. I mean, this is, you know, I'm not the first to put that theory forward, you know, but when looking for Fraunhofer's father, Franz Xavier, I came across this article, The Invisible Grid. So that's, you know, so that's really, you know, there's no coincidences with the fact that the number 8, for whatever reason, needed to make itself known for going forward, right, with this story. It's just, it, you know, Ouroboros, where is he? Where is he? Ouroboros jumped his way in. He had to. Infinity. All right, but it's not even, I'm not even done. It keeps going because this lattice, the only reason I'm even looking at it is because of, it says this 8-dimensional, so like 8-dimensional lattice is E8. Right? And it's part of this group theorem, and it says, right, it's closely related exceptional simple Lie groups. Lie groups? Why? See, and this is the thing about science that, especially that's like mathematical and hardcore astronomical cult of science, the way that they present themselves, you know, because they're so like, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to be rude or disrespectful because, you know, so many good people, you know, are scientists and so forth, you know, and, but, you know, the real arrogant ones out there who, you know, want to look down at, you know, conspiracy theorists or those who question their mathematics and stuff like that. You know, I actually had a private exchange about the joke I made about the suppositions and how, when is satisfactory good enough for science, because in the end, that's the terms and the criteria that they have set up for themselves for the scientific method. And of course, you know, the scientific method works, you know, but it doesn't necessarily have to work for everything. But it does work because a lot of the science that they present with it works. You know, the science is real, and I don't doubt that. You know, I'm just doubting its connection to this idea that that we live in this infinite galaxy that is, you know, trillions of, you know, light years big in every direction kind of thing, and that we're in constant motion, you know, at astronomical speeds throughout it. You know, that's, you know, that's what I'm questioning here with this show. But, you know, and so it's the language that they get to use. They get to use suppose and satisfactory, whereas people, speculators, don't. You know, it's a double standard, right? And that, you know, when you read this, simple Lie groups, you know, it's just crazy, right? So I wanted to look, what's a Lie group? And of course, it's not a Lie group. It's a Lee group. Of course, it's Lee. You know, of course they pronounce Lee. But why do they? Because it's a man's name. Right? Because Lee groups were founded by mathematician Sophus Lee. Sophus. That's not just the masculine Sophie, which is the Sophia, which is what Gnosticism starts from, and all the colors. Right? Unbelievable that they can tie this, you know, geometric, algebraic pattern here, these Lie groups. You know, the guy's name is Sophus. Hey, get out of here. Right? And so, and this is what the E8 is. And when I look at this, I go, and like the math in this is really just crazy for me. I can't get into it. I don't understand these deep algebraic properties. And that's the point, of course. It's its very own language for its very own people. And that group of people is very, very small. It's not like everyone can speak in these complex algebraic equations or read them or understand them. Right? And there's a reason for that too. Again, it's almost like its own security. You know, the limited number, you know, the number of it, right? But it says that it has real and complex forms. Real forms, right? So just they keep using the term real, and we've talked about what is real, and I'll just refresh our memory again. Something that is actually existing as a thing or occurring in fact, not imagined or supposed. And again, the language of science is suppose. They have suppositions. So I wanted to look like further for what is E8. And because it's real, right? They tell me that it's real. right? Is the E8 lattice, again, lattice, building block structure that everything is built on, right? And that they use the term like grid, right? They use the term invisible grid, and they also write the very first lines are Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot, right? Fictitious detectives. But I wanted to, okay, so how is it real? In what ways is it real, right? And so is the E8 lattice the true nature of reality? And we're going to look at that video in a second. Could E8 be the theory of everything, right? And then here we go, finally, with the reality of it. New Scientist. The most beautiful math structure appears in lab for the first time. Mathematicians discovered a complex 248-dimensional symmetry called E8. I was like, all right, let's take a look. All right, so let's do this again. So here we go, right? The most beautiful math structure appears in lab for first time, right? And this is January 7th, another 8, right? 2010. That's unbelievable that this is published on the 8th, right? In honor of E8. And there it is, right? So it says a complex form of mathematical symmetry linked to string theory has been glimpsed in the real world for the first time. In laboratory experiments on what? On exotic crystals. Exotic crystals leaves a lot to be desired from a skeptic's point of view, I would think, right? They discovered a 248-dimensional symmetry called E8 in the late 1800s, using the principles of sophists. Right? I'm not going to get into these guys now, but they say that the dimensions in the structure are not necessarily spatial, like the 3 dimensions we live in, but rather they correspond to mathematical degrees of freedom, which each dimension represents a different variable. Right? In the 1970s, the symmetrical form turned up in calculations related to string theory, a candidate for the theory of everything that might explain all the forces in the universe. But string theory still waits experimental proof. So again, just a theory, just ideas, numbers on paper, that kind of thing. Pretty pictures that they can draw and create with it, I suppose, right? But the structure is also the basis for another proposed theory of everything advanced in 2007 by surfer physicist Garrett Lisi, who refers to E8 as perhaps the most beautiful structure in mathematics. I don't know, like, surfer physicist? But again, they don't show anything about it. They're just that one image, which to me, as I'm like, if they've created it, if it's built in some math, where is it? I want to know what they look like. So let's look up images. And so when I look at it, I go, Jesus, this is really just like spirograph, right? I had a spirograph as a kid, but there it is, the spirograph kit, spirograph basic designs, and look, the bright colors and the geometric shapes that all correspond to the crazy geometry of life patterns, right? Essentially a kid's toy that, in the minds that it catches, introduces the basic concepts of sacred geometry, right? Very interesting. And it's kind of cool that the way the optical illusions can show and mimic dimension and stuff like that. But when I look at what the E8 is, I don't see how is it any different than any other spirograph shape? Like, just a really great spirograph. Right? I want to keep note as I move forward. Again, this is 248, all divisible of 8, just like working with the the computer language of bits, all divisible by 8. All right, again, so they have like this, I've seen these types of balls that, that collapse, and there's mazes, and this is really amazing, but is this what they're talking about in terms of the most beautiful structure ever created in a lab? Is this thing? I like this one because it has the 6 in it instead of the 8. All right, or maybe actually it has the 8 because it's 6 on the outside, 7 on the inside, and 8 would be the outside circle, the rim, maybe. But it's also not only are we talking about the E8, this is representative of the E2. The D2 and the E2. Right? Kind of interesting, I thought, in making the connections I'm trying to make to my story. But how is it any different than the spirographs? And so I wanted to watch this video about it. All right. And now they talk a little bit about the guy and how the surfer dude, who's hanging 10 out there somewhere. Now, he doesn't hang 10, he hangs 8. That's But anyway, he does this complex math thing. Right, but they talk about, let's see if I found it here, how he cheated.
But with a lot of rigorous mathematics to back it up. Now, this kind of math is not present in E8.
So they talk about the math of string theory is not present in the E8. Right? And that the guy Lisi, right? The E8 math does not show how force particles and matter particles fit together.
He is kind of combining these arbitrarily, and that is not acceptable to most.
Arbitrarily, but it's put out there, and you could find all about this thing, but it doesn't really say much about it, the arbitrary nature of it. But they talk about how the science for the E8 isn't that great because Lisi makes this, he kind of cheats.
The elephant in the room is the 24 new theoretical particles that came out of this theory, so it requires the existence of yet undiscovered matter.
So it doesn't really work. So how did they create it if it's just theoretical? How do they make it something real, right? And that they put this out there as a 248, but it's not real. It's really a 224 dimension because he just creates these 24 theoretical particles to make his E8 work. It's unbelievable the way they put this stuff out there, I think. Like it's real. And so they talk in the end how they hope that, wait for it.
It's possible that the Large Hadron Collider, which has since started up after Lisi came up with this theory,
it's possible
could find these theoretical particles.
That it could find, and again, I don't know. All these stories about the Hadron Collider, and I don't know what to make of that. Maybe someday I'm gonna have to look into it. But anyway, I just couldn't believe the way the number 8 just butted its way right into this story for me with the spectroscopy and the technology and these interdimensions and the lattices and the invisible grid in the sky. Chief, that one's for you. And I know this is a chaotic mess, this one, and that's why I called it Acht and Scheisse. I hope when I edit it down it makes a little sense. I had a lot of fun with it. I hope you guys had a lot of fun with it. I know I did. And until the next one, cheers, guys.